Good morning. Tell me you can hear me. Good morning. TLDC chat. Tell me you can hear me now. Says I'm on air. Thank you, Jason, for letting me know that you can hear me. But now I'm just inviting our guest. Welcome to TLDC. TLDC. Get your morning started right. Welcome. Okay, I believe Mr. Mike Lenz has been invited. Welcome to TLDC. I'm not Brent Schlenker. I'm Sam Rogers, and I'm covering for Brent, who is on his way to the old country, to Ireland today. And here's our guest, Mike Lenz. Thanks so much for being here, Mike.
Sure, my pleasure.
We're going to talk today about audio stuff, a thing you may know a thing or two about. Yeah?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, just a bit.
A little bit. Great. So usually on Fridays, we do our video Friday kind of thing. It's been kind of bleeding into like audio video Friday. I thought we'd just break it out and do a whole audio Thursday episode. And so we're going to be talking about today anything to do with e-learning voiceover specifically. We'll talk a little bit about podcasting. Any questions that you have, folks in the chat, you can post them on the side. You can also post them in the Q&A section. We will actually try to pay attention to those today and make sure they don't get lost. So any questions you have about how audio works, how audio doesn't work when things break, questions about the scripting process, about hiring professional voiceover, all that good stuff. It's all fair game today. Any questions you want to ask of Master Mike Lenz will be addressed in all in good time. Yes, sorry, Katie, you missed the awesome intro. I was just grooving a little bit myself.
That was pretty impressive, I got to tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, I do a whole solo a cappella act as the One Mouth Band. I haven't had a chance to talk to you in person yet at all. We've just exchanged a few messages on LinkedIn. So nice to see you in person.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I know we did go back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn because of the podcast that Doug and I have, which I know we'll talk about. We had a chance to chat, and you said, hey, why don't we do this like live with other people so we can actually share some of this stuff. So I think it's a great idea. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great. Thanks. So again, any questions anybody has, start throwing them out there. I would like to start with, hey, who are you again? What do you do?
Yeah. Who the heck are you, right? What the heck do you do? I mean, as you mentioned, I am a professional voice actor. I do quite a bit of e-learning, audiobook work as well, corporate videos, explainer videos. I saw on LinkedIn, somebody had mentioned a really cool phrase. They said it was an Edumercial. And I never heard that before. Edumercial. So kind of a short little 2 to 3 minute snippet that's educating people about a particular topic. I find myself doing more and more of those now for different companies. But I've my life has evolved. I'm a pharmacist by trade. I went to college to be a pharmacist, and which helps with a lot of medical narration as well. I was in politics for a number of years, for about a decade. I served as finance commissioner in my hometown of Saratoga Springs, New York, and I actually served as mayor back in my youth, back in my 30s, and then lost my reelection bid, unfortunately, but at the time was kind of disappointing. But that freed up some bandwidth for me to explore some other interests, one of which was screenwriting. And I had some amateur success at screenwriting, never been paid a dime for it, but was chosen to be by the New York State Writers Institute. I got to be part of a 10-week program. They picked 8 amateur screenwriters from the state of New York. I got to participate in that. And that led to joining a screenwriters group, which then at one of the meetings, I found out about this voiceover thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. I can use my voice to communicate, which is what I really missed about serving in office. Mm-hmm. And I don't have to run for office to do it again, and people will pay me. And I thought, well, that's a pretty good idea. So I dove into that, and that was about 11 years ago. And it's been an evolution ever since. But as you'd mentioned now, doing a lot of e-learning and ultimately started a voiceover podcast. Where I've interviewed over 60 people in the last few years about from all areas of the VO industry, and got to speak at a learning conference last year about the role of the voice actor in e-learning, and that led me to Doug Boucher, who I know, Sam, and many of our listeners may know.
I know of him. I actually I have about as much experience with him as I do with you. Actually, maybe less. I don't know. I've communicated with him directly, but we've been a lot of the same places the same times. I've seen him in the speaker room. Yeah.
And he actually was at the learning conference that I spoke at, and we never met there. Again, thousands of people at these things, and you don't meet everybody. But he found out about me, and then ultimately reached out to me to ask me if I would help him produce and co-host the Learning Innovations podcast, which I'm now doing with him. So, which led me to you. So it's been this really eclectic, convoluted path to where I am today. But I wouldn't change anything. It's been great.
It's all a natural extension of your pharmacy training, I'm sure.
I think it is. Yeah. I think if we went back, that's the core. It all started there for sure.
So I have to ask, just kind of non sequitur. I'm sure you get it, but can you do the inner world thing?
I mean, I can try in a way. I interview people who can do them, and I'm always amazed at how good they are. But every time people think about VO, they often think about the trailer voice and the promo voice. That's not my forte. I'm the everyday voice kind of guy, the guy next door for commercial work and audiobook work and e-learning work. I leave the trailer stuff to those people who are much more qualified and capable with those vocal cords than I am.
Yes,
for sure.
I just had to ask before it comes up in chat,
yeah,
because
absolutely.
I know the joke always gets made.
Absolutely. So when was I somebody asked when I was mayor, 2004, 2005, I think it was a 2-year term. And I actually was mayor of Saratoga when they opened the Saratoga Springs Resort in Walt Disney World. So I got flown down there. They have a Saratoga Springs Resort, and got to participate in that and go for a ride with Mickey in a parade, and it was pretty cool.
So you got to do other voices as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, getting into the audio side of things, like right away, there's a thing on the screen. The popper stopper thing. You've got your earbuds in. Why don't you say a little bit about just what your setup is right now, and why it is that's what you landed on in dialing in for this live stream today?
Yeah, and honestly, when I started, what you can see behind me is some acoustic foam that's in my home studio, that's down in the basement of our home, that I retrofitted and made into the studio. And when I started, I literally had Walmart foam on the backing of poster board put up on the side. And I think Jason Noxon may be on this chat with us, and he was my first audiobook editor, and we worked together on the first audiobooks I did. So he was there when we were recording audiobooks using Walmart foam and a microphone. And so the important point is you don't have to necessarily have this incredibly high-end audio recording studio to do really good work. You just have to make sure that you've treated the space appropriately. And I know really good voice actors that do most of their work in a closet that they retrofitted. So I use it's a room, relatively small room, and I put the acoustic foam around. As you can see, it's not wall to wall. I have a microphone set up, a Bluebird microphone in the corner, and I have some corner acoustic foam behind it, and then on the opposite corner to kind of grab the sound waves, because you really just want to absorb. You don't want the sound waves to be bouncing off all the corners of your room, because then they're going to ultimately end up back in your microphone, and that's where you're going to get echo. So I again, self-taught. I created the acoustic treatment and tested it, and it works. It works really, really well for me. And essentially, it's a microphone. It's my computer. I have a Mbox Mini interface, and that I connect my microphone to my computer with, and I have the pop filter. This is my black Yeti, which I use for podcasting. It's not the microphone I use for my professional VO work, but it works very well. It's a USB mic, and I can talk to you on it, but I use it for podcasting, but not for my e-learning audiobook and commercial work. I have a different microphone that I use for that. So, but it's pretty basic. It's not too complex, and I like it that way because I'm not a techie. But it's worked for me.
Great. And then you've got the earbuds going, of course, so that you can hear yourself. And
I have I have these babies right here that I use when I'm recording. I see your setup where you kind of have one on and one off, and I've used that before as well. And sometimes when I record, I don't have my headphones on. I know some voice actors that never use their headset, and some that always use it. I'm using these when we're chatting, but when I'm recording professionally, I put on my super duper headphones so that I can cut out all the noise and hear it very, very crisply. So, but I know there are voice actors out there that don't believe you should have headphones on, because you're gonna be too critical. You're gonna be worried too much about everything that you hear, and you're not going to give as natural a read. So I've tried it both ways, but I always end up back with the headphones on, because I really want to hear exactly how it's sounding.
Yeah. It's kind of like hearing yourself under a microscope, which is good and bad. And it depends on the noises in your head and how that balances against the noises in your ears.
Absolutely. And it's important in the editing process to hear all that stuff, not necessarily in the recording process, because it can affect your read sometimes if you're hearing too much of that and trying to adjust, because a lot of that stuff you can take care of during editing. So
great. Jason, who you mentioned is here, wanted to mention a furnace hot water heater.
Well, and I did that before we came on. I mean, literally, we have 4 children, a dog, 2 cats, 4 chickens. So when Daddy has to record, people have to get everybody in the family to be quiet. Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, let's wait till the chickens have gone, up to roost for the night. But what I have to do, I mean, we do have a furnace, we have a hot water heater, so I have to turn all that off, because even in a room like this that's acoustically treated, you have to deal with this ambient noise all the time. So before we went on, I went over and turned off the furnace, and the kids are upstairs and watching a show while Daddy's down here talking to you. So yeah, ambient noise is never our friend. And Jason and I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get rid of all that noise, but I think we did it pretty well.
Anthony also brings up shock mounts for vibration that's in the microphone stand. Is that something that you have going as well, or is that not so much an issue for you?
Oh, no, I do. Yeah, I mean, it's critical. And I sent you that picture. At some point, we probably should put it up and ask people what they think is wrong with that picture. But shock mount is critical. You have, in my opinion, you have to have a shock mount if you're going to do professional recording. And I don't put podcasting into that category, because I think the expectation of people listening to podcasts is not as great as when they hear a commercial or an e-learning module. But I think that the shock mount is critically important. So this is a picture that I used at the learning conference, and I asked my audience if they could point out all the things that were wrong in that picture. And Jason's not allowed to answer this question, but I'd be curious to see if people could tell there are multiple things wrong. And then I found this picture on an e-learning, it was on the internet, about talking about hiring the right voice for your e-learning project. And this was the picture that they used. So I won't attribute it to anybody, but there are multiple things wrong with this picture. Curious to see if anybody knows what they may be.
Yeah, throw all those in the chat. How many mistakes can you find
And it is related to the last question that was asked about the shock mount, because there is a shock mount in this picture.
And Anthony, I don't know if we're going to go with the unicorn kind of thing. No, it's not growing out of her head. She's not wearing a microphone helmet.
Yeah, we couldn't make it any larger. No, she is not actually a mutant with.
Although I'll say putting microphone right next to somebody's head like that, like eventually they're going to go and bang their head on the microphone and change the placement of everything. So maybe we could.
Yeah. So we had somebody say no pop guard, and she's close to the mic. That is correct. I think I won't let Jason answer it. So I will tell you probably the most awful mistake is that the microphone that she's the microphone that she's using, you don't speak into the top of it. It has to be turned, and you speak into this part of it. So that's exactly. So you just can't do that. Well, you can, but that's a cardioid microphone, so it's coming in this way. So when she's like this, those waves have to come around, and it's going to be really echoey. So the microphone is actually wrong. It's supposed to be like this.
Let me just get one, or maybe you have one handy to show the difference.
Yeah, mine's way over there, so it would be hard for me to grab it. But yeah, you want to grab it. And I think it was Anthony maybe that mentioned about the shock mount. So that shock mount is there for a reason. The reason it's there is to prevent anything shocking the microphone. So it sits on that shock mount and it absorbs. So for her to have her hand on that microphone, you're going to hear that when she's recording. So you're not supposed to touch the shock mount or the microphone at all when you're recording. Right. And there you go. Yeah, he's got that picture.
Just wanted to show the difference between the kinds of microphones that these are. So it's like a camera or something. Like, what kind of lens is it? What kind of field is it capturing? What's it focused on? This one focuses up. The pointy end is the business end. This is where the sound is heard. And actually, just to make it even more obvious, this is the listening part. This is like your ear, the diaphragm. And you can find microphones that are just like this. This is just the fancy thing that is kind of like the popper stopper thing that keeps it from being so noisy with all the air. But this kind of microphone, it's actually listening on this side. The side address, as Jason says, that's the proper terminology for it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, talking in the pointy end of this microphone, you may be able to hear something, but it's not going to be how it's supposed to be used. So it's like if you want to whisper in somebody's ear and you're talking in their foot, they might be able to hear you, but that's not what it's for.
Yeah, the quality is certainly going to be compromised for sure. Yeah, and Anthony said something about, I don't know exactly. He was saying something about the shock mount doesn't matter if she's holding the mid like that. I don't know if I agree with that, but I'm not sure exactly.
Well, she's canceling out the use of the shock mount by holding it, I think is what he's saying.
Yeah. And again, from an e-learning perspective, which is what this article was about, it's just funny how the stock photo that they used was to the layperson, it looks like, oh yeah, that makes sense. People are used to seeing people hold microphones like they're on stage at a rock concert, but she's not.
Right. Clearly. Yeah. I think the caption, let the SME do the audio. That's good, Joe. That's probably the case actually in this image.
Yeah. And one of the things I found fascinating when I went to the conference to speak was that, and I was surprised by it, but I'm not now because having learned more about it, was that many of the people that attended my presentation were people within the organization that were tasked with doing the voiceover, and they weren't voice actors. And and I'm not sitting here being, only hire a voice actor. I'm not saying that, but they were facing a lot of challenges because they didn't really know what to do. They didn't, and one of the people was somebody who was tasked with doing the compliance training for his company, and the person who he gave the assignment, because they weren't going to go outside and use an outside vendor, said, you got to do the recording. He did the recording for it and sent it to him. And this guy said, well, what was that noise I heard in the background? He goes, well, I had my aquarium on, at the time, and I was sitting at a desk next to it, and there was like in the background the whole time. And honestly, he didn't, he just didn't know what he didn't know.
Right.
And he didn't realize that that noise was, was going to affect the final product significantly.
Right.
So, it's amazing that there are a lot of companies out there that put a lot of time and effort and money into creating e-learning modules for various reasons. And then at the end say, oh yeah, what are we going to do about the voiceover? Who's going to do that? And they try to find people within internally. And I'm sure sometimes they find very qualified people, but sometimes they don't. And maybe sometimes it doesn't matter, but I was shocked a little bit by that so many companies do that.
Yeah, especially after having invested so much every other step of the process.
Yeah, that's right. And the when you think about it in terms of whether or not I should hire a professional voiceover for the project, one of the things I talked about at the conference was that there are several reasons. One, that you don't have to. There's a lot of things you don't have to worry about when you hire a professional to do it. You think about the acoustic treatment that I'm in now. A lot of times companies don't have that, and then they're struggling to try to edit it out after the fact.
Right.
When you hire a professional VO, you're going to get somebody who can not only record it, but can also edit it. So you're going to, I deliver finished files to my clients. So it's finished. I record it, I edit it, I convert it to an MP3 if they want, and I send it to them. And it's done. And if we need to make some fixes, and if I make a mistake or if they have changes, then I turn them around fairly quickly. And then what's the cost of pulling Bill from accounting, who has a good voice, when he's in that room recording for you? He's not doing his other job. So what's the cost to the company for that? So, there are some reasons there's a lot of reasons not to hire a VO, but I would offer that there's a lot of reasons, and in some cases could be more cost effective to have you hire somebody professional to do it for you.
Well, one of the questions that's been asked in the Q&A is about developing our own skills. To be able to deliver voiceover, like maybe right now it would be more appropriate to hire someone, or those kind of calculations are being made. But like, how can we improve our own delivery right now? Do you have any tips on maybe resources to look at, or just we've already talked about like the Shockmount being important, or is there anything else that you could give as advice or tips to those of us who'd like to be able to do that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And you and I didn't really even talk before to talk about questions. And if I had told you that, I probably would have said, ask that question, Sam, because it's a great question. Because
well, Toddy's
so there you go. Smart. But one of the things that I've kicked around and I talk to people about is the idea of companies that want to do this internally. So for whatever budgetary reasons, they don't feel they have the resources to do it. Or there may be other reasons, but there are certainly things you can do. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is making sure you have the right equipment, and that whatever area that you're recording in is as acoustically treated as you can do it. So, I've even talked to companies about going to them and saying, look, I'll come in and spend a day with your team, and we'll go over some things. Show me your space. Where are you recording? Show me your equipment. What are you using? This is a Blue Yeti microphone with a pop filter. You could use that for e-learning if it was in the right acoustically treated room, and it's not all that expensive. So those are important things. And then the next step is, once you record it, how are you then going to edit that and make it sound good? And there are some relatively inexpensive and often free software that you can use, like Audacity. I use Audacity all the time. I used to use Pro Tools, and it was overkill for the work that I did for voice actors. So I use Audacity, which is free software, and I do commercial work, e-learning, audiobooks, all using Audacity software. And I love it. It works very effectively for what I need it to do. And it's actually a relatively simple software to learn, but there are some little tricks of the trade that you're going to want to kind of know to help get rid of any ambient background noise to the extent that you can, depending on how the room is treated. But there are things you can do. So in that case, you have to find a good editing software. And from a budgetary point of view, there's nothing better than Audacity because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure your room that you're recording in is acoustically treated to the extent that you can. And make sure that you have a good enough quality microphone that you're going to be able to record it and it's going to sound good. I mean, those are really kind of the three basics.
And for the delivery, in the question it was asked like about, breathing or concerns about the actual read.
Yeah, and we talked about that at the learning conference as well that I spoke at. In that, what I actually did was I had people come up and speak and read commercial scripts, and then I would give them direction, and then have them reread based on the direction. And there's a great, I can see if I can pull it up. My audiobook narrator coach, Sean Pratt, I give him full credit for this because I didn't think of it, but he said there's a rule of 5 for being an effective communicator. And he said that you have to be engaging, enthusiastic, and entertaining in order to educate and enlighten. So you have to be engaging, enthusiastic, and entertaining, just like Sam is. Truthfully. I mean, what you did in the intro was engaging, enthusiastic, and entertaining. And your effort is to educate and enlighten, which is what we're doing here. We're all trying to educate and enlighten one another. So from an e-learning perspective, when you're working for a client, the end user, that's what you're trying to do. And you can't effectively do that if you're not presenting the information in a way that's going to engage them. Regardless of our role as voice actors is regardless of the content. Our job is to make it entertaining and engaging. So it could be very dry. It doesn't mean we have to, do a song and dance, but we have to make it engaging. And what I always try to do is when you're thinking about, if we have some instructional designers here, if you're creating content, try to think about the end user when you're creating that, because the spoken word is very different than the written word. And when people are listening to something, you and I are having a conversation. There's a conversational tone. We stop, we start, we breathe, we emphasize, we de-emphasize. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it interesting. So you have to understand who you're talking to, and you can find that out from who your instructional designer is. Who am I as the voice actor speaking to? Am I speaking to a peer? Am I speaking to somebody who's in a position that's different than mine? Am I speaking to a group? Am I speaking to an individual? Because how I approach that copy is going to be different depending on who I'm talking to. And the number one most important, you had asked earlier, could you do your in a world voice? Because people, when they think about voice acting, they think about, do I have a good voice?
Right.
Which is relatively important in this industry. But the most important thing is, can you interpret copy? Mm-hmm. Can you take words on a piece of paper and make it sound like you're not reading words on a piece of paper? Mm-hmm. If you can do that, you can be as successful as a voice actor. If you can't, you won't. There are people that have great voices. Mm-hmm. They can't interpret copy. They stumble, they mumble, they see a sentence, they can't get it out. When I do e-learning and I do audiobooks, people understand that I'm reading something, but they don't want to really think that I'm reading something. They want to hear it. They want to get drawn into it. And the best compliment that an audiobook narrator can get is that I forgot that you were even reading to me. I just was so absorbed in the story that I was just listening. And the same as all those rules apply to e-learning. I think we sort of tend to toss e-learning aside, say it's just something we got to get done. And often it is, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't be engaging and entertaining, and interpreting copy is critical to that.
Interpreting copy is critical to that. How'd I do?
Exactly. Well, we might need to do a little direction on that, but good first effort.
Great. Well, I'll click done answering for that question. Thanks for that, Toddy. And being that it is the 8:30 mark for our Pacific time audience, what Brent usually does here is he says all sorts of things about TLDC, the conference that's coming up. So I will attempt to do that as well. Mike, you will still be audible, but I'm going to get rid of your screen for just a moment.
Sure.
I believe toggle video and oh no, that doesn't do that. I'm usually a participant, so I haven't driven this part of it. Maybe you'll just stay on screen for a moment while I say TLDC is a conference that will be taking place at the end of January in Phoenix, Arizona. This is a daily conversation. TLDC, the C stands for chat, but there is another C that stands for conference, community, where there's a whole lot of different things that the C can stand for. But basically a way of all of us learning and development professionals to gather, either daily on a live stream like this, speaking to experts such as Mike, sometimes just rambling on about the things that annoy us or the things that we're working on in our own endeavors for the companies that we work for or as independent consultants. And we will all be gathering physically, or at least 100 of us, is capped at 100, will be gathering together in Phoenix, Arizona at the end of January. So if you're interested in that, check out this website. This is tldc.us. Find out all about the Training, Learning, and Development Conference. That's what the TL and D are for. I don't know if Brent and Luis are going to have anything specific to do with voiceover at that conference, but I'm happy to talk to you. I will be there speaking and have a bit of experience as well in professional voiceover and music and audio engineering and all podcasting and all that good stuff. But we'll have lots of great conversations, a lot of them spur of the moment, a lot of them kind of unconference model, gathering on what's most alive in the moment and solving problems, real world stuff, not just griping about the industry. So hope to see more of you there. I know a few of you that are here are registered. Thanks, Luis, for throwing the link out there. And yeah, we'll get back to you, Mike. So,
yeah, and I saw there was one question about the Blue Yeti. He said, Todd, he said, love my Blue Yeti, Mike. Mine is mounted. I have a stand, so you can see it's here. It's upside down. Mm-hmm. But I also have the stand, and I think it works effectively both ways. You know, Doug Boucher from Learning Innovations podcast, I had him order a Blue Yeti and a Yeti, and he has it on a stand, and then he bought an acoustic wraparound, so it wraps around the desktop stand, and that absorbs a lot of the sound coming from within his office, because his office is not obviously acoustically treated, but it does a good enough job from the podcasting point of view. So you can do either. I just happen to have mine on a stand so I can swing it around because I use it for different things, and I'll use it to audition for audiobooks. And it's just easier for me to not have to be moving around a mic. I just have it positioned and it's ready to roll whenever I need it. So, but either way, depending on what you're doing, either way can work really effectively. And there was somebody said, do you record stereo or mono? I always record in mono for voiceover because it's just my voice. So I always record in mono.
Yeah, with the mono versus stereo thing, it doesn't mean that you're going to export just a mono file, although a lot of times that's appropriate, and especially for e-learning courses where you're looking for a smaller file, mono is generally going to be okay. But a lot of the stereo kind of effect is just allowing the sound of the room to get in as opposed to the sound of the voice. So you can play with that kind of stuff. It's easier to play with if there's only one signal to work with, and then you can apply processing and all that after the fact. Yeah. And like I said, I'm not a techie guy, and oftentimes for me, I have had to do situations where I had to lay some music underneath. So from the intro and the outro on my podcast, and also Doug's in my podcast.
So again, I'm very basic when it comes to that. I'll lean on Jason if I have questions because he's an audio engineer and very, very talented at that. So, but in my world, for my purposes, I'm definitely I've learned what I need to know when I need to know it. That's the kind of person that I am because I got so much going on that I just I can't. There's even with Audacity, there's so many things that I could learn about, and I learn them as I need them, and I discover things that allow me to do things like, I figured out how to, for whatever reason, on my P's, I pop a lot in terms of I get a lot of air behind my P's when I say, position, poison, people, and I found out on Audacity that I can apply equalization. I just set it up one time, and I just hit a button. I highlight the area, hit a button, and that air goes away. It takes that bass goes away, and it sounds like butter. And I learned it because I had to, but it works wonderfully. And it doesn't, you can apply these effects to the work that you're doing, but it doesn't. The key that you want to make sure you don't do is because you can, is make yourself sound other than who you are. There's a way to make you just a little bit sweeter sounding, a little bit round off those edges, but you have to be very careful not to, I could make myself sound like I'm saying in a world like Don LaFontaine, right, who was famous for doing that, but it's not me. So, you have to be careful that you're not presenting yourself to be something that you're not in the VO world, because that'll catch up to you quick.
Great.
For
sure. Let's get a couple other questions. I think this one is more along the lines of live sound. I'm not sure if you have experience with stuff like that. We've gotten some questions about like lavalier mics, the clip-on kind of mics. One from Josh Cavalier here on wireless mics. I've had mixed results over the years, and I exclusively use wired setups now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I would ask how is he using it? A lot of it depends on how you're using it. I host a local television talk show here in Saratoga Springs, and we use the clip-on microphones, and it's effective for the purposes that we're using it for. In an interview style format like this, it probably would work okay. You certainly couldn't use it if you were. I wouldn't recommend using it if you were recording, e-learning, audiobook, commercial work. You'd want a professional microphone to do that. Mm-hmm. But it depends on the context in which you're using it. Has a lot to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Katie asks, have you ever worked with voiceover service like Voice Bunny?
Yeah, I mean, I don't personally. They call them pay to play. So the P2P, voices.com, voices123, Voice Bunny. There's a lot of them out there. I don't subscribe to them currently. There are a lot of reasons why people do and other reasons why people don't. There's been some controversy surrounding some of the pay to plays in terms of what they're charging from a management fee and how they're discounting what the voice actor gets. So for me, and I'm not saying that I'll never do pay to play, but for me, it's been more effective for me to market myself to clients directly, and even through LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably been the most effective for me in terms of connecting with people who may use my services. Now, that being said, pay to play, if I was going to pick a pay to play, and I'm not in no way affiliated with this, and I'm not even a paid member, but Voice123, the nice thing about them is that you are allowed to communicate with clients. And that's probably the one that I may join this year, because you get to audition for work, but you also get to communicate directly with the client. You're not just a number, you're not just a voice, you are a person, and you're allowed to communicate. I belong to eLearning Voices, which is another website. I just essentially a site where you can go and find voices for your e-learning project. And again, you get to communicate directly with the client. I just pay an annual fee to be part of their roster. So there are sites where you can do that as well. So the pay to plays, depending on who you talk to, there's people that have huge success with pay-to-plays. There's other people that will go on pay-to-plays and get nothing or very little for their investment. And the other key to the pay-to-plays is that you have to be available, because you think about it from a decision maker's point of view. If you have hundreds of auditions coming in for a particular job that you're trying to cast, you might listen to 5, 10. You just need to make a decision and get it done. And so if you're not in a position where you can get on that computer and get that audition in quickly, you really put yourself at a disadvantage. So when you go to audition and you're audition number 125, odds are you may not even get listened to, let alone picked. So that's important as well. You have to be able to have the time to actually get on there and audition when those auditions come in.
So for a voiceover artist, for someone providing the voiceovers, some of those services may be advantages, disadvantages. But for someone who's on the buying end, who's on the purchasing end, are there any reasons that folks would not want to use something like that, or that you would
like a pay-to-play site, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, I have a client that I just recently started working with, and it's a Fortune 500 company that I probably shouldn't say, but they're a big company, and the person I talked to about that met him via LinkedIn, and he had used Voices.com, and one of the issues that he had with Voices.com was that he would go and he would pick somebody. And every time he needed to make a change, or if it didn't come back the way he wanted, he had to go back through this relatively arduous process through Voices.com, the management team, that layer, to get back to the voice actor, to get the content changed, to get it re-recorded, to get it back, to pay for it. And it was just very time consuming for him. And I spoke to another person at the and somebody asked what the conference was. It was the Learning 2016. It was Elliot Maisie's Learning 2016 down in Orlando. And somebody from another large corporation came up to me and said, I'm having a really difficult time sourcing good talent internationally as well, because they did a lot of work in the UK, and they just don't really know whether a talent is good or not. And one of the things I offered to her was that, I have essentially a quote unquote roster of over 60 people that I've auditioned on my VO podcast. These are the cream of the crop, the best of the best. They're people that I consider friends and colleagues that I would recommend and do recommend and work with and get referred by for work. And I said to her, I said, look, you can reach out to me, because I've been hired by different companies to manage the VO piece. So they come to me and say, look, I may not even use you as the voice actor, but I need you to go to find me an African-American voice, a voice that has a mild Spanish accent, an English voice, a British voice, a Scottish voice. And I find them because I have this network of people, and then they pay me a management fee. And then they only have to deal with one person, me.
Right.
I'm their contact point. I go find the talent, I get the files, and I upload the files to the client. So from a buyer's point of view, working directly with somebody like me or another professional VO, if you can find them, offers you a great deal of flexibility. Because one thing we pride ourselves on is our ability to work effectively with the client and turn around the product quickly, efficiently, and professionally. And because that's our bread and butter. If I can't do that, then I'm not going to be able to compete. So as a buyer, you want to find somebody that you can rely on. And Jason asked this question: how do you know? You can find people in different places, but you can go to places like WOVO, which is the world of voiceovers. They're a great VO organization. You can go to places like GVAA, Global Voice Acting Academy. You can go to Mike Lenz Voice and look at my podcast page, and you're going to find people who are legitimate, very talented voice actors who can do almost anything for you in the voiceover world. So you don't necessarily, you're not locked into using the pay-to-plays to find talent. And in often cases, you may not get the best talent, because really the only thing you need to join any of those pay-to-plays is a microphone and a computer. So, sometimes you have to be careful what you pay for.
Okay, great answer. With being able to capture all the voiceover, you mentioned podcast a little bit. What are some of the some of the main differences that you think of if you're doing something like for a Fortune 500 client, like you mentioned, for an e-learning voiceover purpose versus doing something for a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, it's from a podcasting point of view, it's like all the pressure's off from my point of view, because that's just fun for me. You know, when I do the podcast, when I'm talking with other VO artists via Skype, I record via Skype, and I have Ecamm recorder which allows me to record. It saves the file, and I drop it into Audacity. I can edit it and upload it through Libsyn, and off it goes. And I've learned all that, and it's relatively easy for me to do now, but there is a relatively steep learning curve in the beginning for me, even as a voice actor. But the quality that you need to get is not, the expectation is not as high. So therefore the pressure is not as high, because we're really just conveying information to people. Like our sound quality is good. It's not great. It's good. And nobody on this chat cares. You know, everybody kind of understands that, because we're just conveying information. We're having a conversation. And but when you're doing a job for an e-learning client, or a commercial that's going to go on television or radio, you know, the quality expectation is exponentially higher. It has to be as near to perfect as it can be, because there are studios out there that will make it perfect, and there are VO actors and talent out there that can do it perfectly. So if you want to be in that game, you have to have the ability to do it, and do it at that level, because the expectation is that that's the standard in the industry, is that it be that good. Now, e-learning and corporate video work, as we talked about earlier, there are definitely different layers of expectations, even from the corporate point of view, because one person I talked to from the conference said, my upper management team just wants this compliance training done. They just need it done. They don't care what it sounds like. They just need to meet this criteria. Just get it done and get it out the door. So they didn't care. They didn't care what it sounded like, you know. So there are expectations even at that level.
So maybe it depends on the project, of course, but maybe you know, commercial work, e-learning, audio, maybe somewhere between that and the podcasting like level of quality. Is that fair to say?
Definitely. The highest level of quality is your commercial read for radio and TV. And you know, some of the work that I've done, they don't even mess around with home studio. They say, where's the closest studio to you? We'll pay for it. We'll pay for the studio time. We're going to do an ISDN patch or a Source Connect, and we just want to work with a professional studio, because then we don't have to worry about it. You know, even though you tell me you have a home recording studio and you tell me that the quality is going to be just as good, they'd rather pay an extra $100, $200 to get that studio. And, you know, and that's perfectly fine. I can appreciate that and understand that. But yeah, the expectation at the commercial level is it's got to be spot on perfect.
And to be able to direct that in real time too, like with the video feed back and forth, as well as, you know, being able to kind of monitor what's happening and get different reads of something. A good friend of mine recorded a lot of video games, specifically video game audio, where you'll get a couple different reads of the same line, because they're using those for like different paths, even if it's the same text, and being able to direct that, even if the VO talent is in London and they're, you know, recording it essentially there, but producing it from LA or wherever the company happens to be. You know, you can keep that you can control those parameters. It can still be distributed across the world, but it needs to be a different level than just your home studio kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and in the video game world, which would be phenomenal to be able to get into that world, more often than not, you know, you really have to be in Los Angeles to do that kind of work. There are apps you can do, you know, remotely, but the vast majority of the video game world is in Los Angeles, because you have to go to the studio and they literally have the game up on a screen, just like you said, and they'll take you through the different scenarios, and you have to act. And, you know, that not only would that be a dream job? Would be able to get cast in a video game. I would love to be able to do that. But I just did my first fiction audiobook. I've done a lot of nonfiction audiobook, and I got to do my first fiction audiobook recently, and it's a Western. I'm just finishing it up now. And I watched Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid about 10 times when I was a kid. And so I'm getting to live out my fantasies of cowboys and Indians. But to do a fiction audiobook and to be every single character, and you have to change your voice for each of those characters, and they come into the story and they leave the story and they come back, and you have to be consistent. When they come back, they have to sound the same as they did in the beginning of the story. And and it's a whole different level of acting, because I'm not being Mike. I have to be, multiple characters, and that's where you really get to act. And that's for a voice actor, that's so much fun. So I'm hooked on fiction audiobooks now, and I think you can bring that to a lot of the work that you do. And it's not that being yourself is, as I said earlier, you still have to be interesting when you're yourself. You still have to be engaging. But it's a lot of fun to be a character, and I bet those video games just must be a blast.
Yeah, I've been in some of those sessions, not as the voice actor, but just because my buddy had a studio, and I would like sneak in to some of those sessions just to watch and just to learn. And yeah, it's great to see people who are at the top of their game, at the top of their craft.
Yeah,
and also like it's exciting because I could watch and learn so much. But like anything, like if you were going to watch someone develop an e-learning course, there might be a lot of things that weren't so exciting along in that process.
Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Oh, we gotta, no, is this okay. Oh, wait, technical difficulties, like all that stuff still happens too, even at high levels.
It does.
I wanted to get one more question here that was asked before we wrap up. Paul asks about the best practices in working with someone remotely. I was wondering if you could say a few of your experiences or just things that you've learned.
So you're saying as a voice actor dealing with somebody who's directing you remotely? Is that what we're thinking?
Both sides of the equation. I think most of our audiences are going to be working with folks such as yourself. Yeah. How is it that from the producer director kind of end, that what is it that you want to hear on your end that makes sense to you?
Yeah, and I do this a lot in the e-learning world, is communicating with whoever is creating the content. I think we make a mistake when we don't engage the voice actor early on in the process. Not that the voice actor is going to create your content for you, but as I said before, when you're creating content, you want to create content from an e-learning point of view that is going to translate well into the spoken word. And oftentimes you can engage the voice actor in that and help you in that process, because when our worst thing that the number one thing that we don't like as e-learning voiceover narrators is run-on sentences, because we need to breathe. And oftentimes I'll see that in copy. There'll be a paragraph that's one sentence, and you're like, oh my gosh, so you have to take a really deep breath and try to manage your breath control to get it all out. So, from a perspective of the instructional designer or whoever the content creator is, to try to think when you're writing the content, to think at how would this sound when it's spoken, and even speak it to yourself, as you're writing out the content. Say it out loud and see how it sounds conversationally, because we're always trying to do as conversational a read as we can. And that level of communication is critical. And then the other thing that I run into quite a bit, and sometimes it's inevitable, is that I'll get content, I'll get the script, and it's the final script. And I'll say, okay, is the storyboard ready? Well, the storyboard is not quite ready, but we have the final script, so just go record it. I would love to record off of this. Yeah, I would love a storyboard in a perfect world, because I want to see the images, because then I know where my natural breaks are, and I can help you. Right. I can help you. Sometimes they want me to split the file up, sometimes they don't. So if I'm not splitting the file up, I'll do a 1.5 beat so that slide can repopulate, can populate with the next slide. So if I see that on a storyboard versus just getting a script, then I can help facilitate that and make that easier. And but then inevitably, you record it, you get it all done, you deliver it to your client, and then it goes up to legal, and it goes up to somebody else, and it comes back. Right. Oh, we need to do this and this, and I'm happy to do it. And I often don't charge for small things, but if there's significant changes that I've got to go get reset up and create a new file and re-edit, then, I'm going to charge a little bit more for that. And so I always tell people, just wait until it's really final and everything's done, and I'll turn it around for you generally within 24 to 48 hours. So it's not like there's going to be this huge wait, depending on obviously the content. And I'm usually working in 5 to 10 minute e-learning modules, and that's kind of my world. That make sure you've got everything ready to roll, because it's not going to, then it won't cost you more for me to have to redo it, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier for everybody. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that's one of the things that I find in my experience is that they'll send you stuff before it's really ready, and then it's not in a form that allows you to be able to interpret that copy as effectively as you could if you had a storyboard in front of you. Right.
So be done by the time you're getting to the voiceover artist, I guess.
Yeah.
If the file says final version 4, you're probably in the right territory.
Because I find myself I'll send a file, and then I'll have to say revise. Then it'll be revised final, right. And it depends on how many times I have to revise it. But
yeah, we all end up doing that, unfortunately. Yeah, final never really stays that way.
It's okay. I'm not. I don't want to sound like I'm whining. It's fine. I work with on whatever circumstances are presented to me, but best practices probably wait.
Great. And for the podcast thing, just to bring that back around too, you mentioned that you do this one with your voiceover folks that you've interviewed, the other one with Doug Boucher, Learning Innovations. Are there podcasts that you are listening to, or that you're influenced by, I should ask?
Well, the one that actually got me started in the podcasting world was Entrepreneur on Fire, Johnny Lee Dumas, which is hugely successful, and I got a lot of my initial information from him, from a lot of the free information that he provides very kindly. So that has had a huge influence on me. What I found in the podcasting world is that I'm finding clients are now coming to me asking me to help, because there's a lot of companies that want to do internal podcasting, and even people that want to create podcasting. The biggest challenge that people have is that they have a great idea for a podcast, but then they don't know how to actually make it happen. So I've got another client that I'm negotiating with now who wants to do a radio show / podcast, and wants me to help produce and co-host. Now, I'm time limited in the amount of time I can do from a co-hosting point of view, but in the podcasting world, the helping people to get up to speed on producing a podcast, or get it up to the level they need it to be, has been kind of an interesting career kind of path for me through this podcasting world. But honestly, I don't have a lot of time to listen to podcasts with the 4 kids and the dog and the chickens and the cats and my wife and all these other things I'm doing, that I don't listen to a lot of podcasts unless somebody sends me a specific, like Jason has sent me, said, you got to listen to this one, and I'll listen to them. But I don't have a specific podcast other than EO Fire that I listen to, on any kind of on a regular basis. I wish I had more time, because I would. There's a lot of great ones out there for sure.
Yeah, I think we mentioned John Lee Dumas in this live stream before. JLD, you'll see in the chat as well. EO Fire, Entrepreneur on Fire. Somebody can throw some links up there. That'd be great. He's got a podcaster's paradise kind of thing that he sells as well, with the whole community, which I haven't subscribed to, but there's a lot of folks that get great value out of it. And he makes many things available for free, especially on that like scrappy startup kind of thing, like stuff like that he makes available just for signing up for his list and stuff. So that's a great resource.
And just very quickly, I think Joseph had asked, specify pronunciation of irregular words or industry jargon. That's a huge one, because, from the voice actor perspective, we need to know, there's a lot of times you use industry jargon that we're not familiar with. So we've either got to go educate ourselves, but if you, as the instructional designer or content creator of any kind, if you put into that direction, say, you need to say the letters A, B, C, D, E, don't, or read it out as AFSCO, that's absolutely critically important and helpful to us, and avoids having to go back and fix it after. So let us know whether you need it to be read or whether you want the specific letters pronounced.
Yeah, great point. Also in the script, an easy way to do that is, if you need the letters out, is to just put dashes between them. Mm-hmm. And then we know that, this isn't dash, it's DASH.
Yep. And that's my default. If I see that, exactly like you said, Sam, if I see the dashes, then I'm going to read the letters. If I don't, I'm not going to. So good piece of advice.
Well, anything else that you'd like to share with the listening audience, the viewers?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just thank you for having me on. I think, I discovered TLDChat through our discussions on LinkedIn, and I think what a great forum. I've been on some of the chats now, listening, and not only is it great to hear what the guest is saying, but what's happening on the sidebar is just even, is wonderful as well. So congratulations to you for creating this program, because I think it's incredibly helpful. And, if people want to find out more about me, MikeLenzVoice.com is the best place to go. You can go to my podcast page. You can get all the information about me there. And check out the Learning Innovations podcast, because Doug's a great guy. It's his baby. I'm just kind of the co-host to help facilitate things, but a lot of neat information there as well at Learning Innovations podcast.
Great. I just put your link there in the chat, and I assume people can find your Twitter and LinkedIn and all that good stuff from there too.
They can. Yep.
Great. And we mentioned podcasts a little bit. I know this just came out last week and we talked about it. I just wanted to include it in this conversation too, which you will find Learning Innovations, as well as basically every other English language podcast that is currently being produced. In one list, there's about 20 of them. If you want to go and listen to any L&D themed podcasts. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in today and asking questions. Feel free to reach out to Mike directly if you have additional questions. And thanks so much, Mike, for coming in today and helping all of us produce better audio and hire better talent and know what matters to folks who are doing the work that you do.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you for having me. I really had a lot of fun.
Okay, great. Thanks. We'll see ya. And thanks everyone else again. Tomorrow on TLDChat, it's Video Friday. So we'll be talking a little bit about green screens, and just because that keeps coming up, everyone keeps asking. Doing a little bit of a studio home build. Hopefully, Ajay and his wife are putting together a video production studio. So we'll have a couple before pictures and talk about building out your own studio. I saw Mike Simmons, you got your bricks in the mail, the pull down bricks, the picture of the bricks. So we'll talk about backdrops and stuff a bit tomorrow. And of course, anything else that you want to ask, any other questions that you have about lighting or continuing this conversation about audio, the scripting process, anything that you want to ask, that's what we're here for every weekday, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. And I forget what we are in Marco time. Was it 4 p.m. or something in the UK? Thanks, everybody, for being a part of it. And as always, the recordings of this and every episode are available in our archives at TLDC.us is the place to go. So thanks so much. And I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow and covering for Brent again tomorrow. All next week, we have some other guest hosts. Ajay will be up. I'm not sure exactly who else we have lined up, but if you're interested in stuff like that, check out our Facebook group, and look forward to seeing y'all tomorrow. See you later. TLDC. See you tomorrow. TLDC. Video Friday. We're coming up tomorrow. We'll have fun while the Brent's away. See ya.